This is Burn the Manual, brought to you by DeNovo Digital. We're here to light it up.
Here we're rewriting the rules of business, branding, and culture. No cliches, no business speak, just real insights. If you ever thought there's a better way to do this, there is.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. What are we talking about? That's the question of the day.
Yeah. Talking about why people feel the need to stop or pause or reduce spending in marketing first when their budgets are low.
Yeah, that's a good question. I was thinking, obviously knowing that we were just talking about this, I was trying to think of my thoughts around that and how to answer the why, but as always, I'm interested in your thoughts.
Yeah. I think it has a lot to do with a few different factors, and almost none of them are related directly to marketing itself. One is when you're looking at ways to cut cost or grow revenue, cutting cost is faster. So people who have a reduction of, hey, we're spending too much, usually the quick answer is to cut costs and not to make more money. And so marketing is an easy place for most people when if you're just looking at a spreadsheet, marketing fares pretty poorly on a spreadsheet because a lot of people don't have the correct attribution set up. They're not talking to each other the way that they should be. And marketing is just this constant outflow of money without anything being attributed back to it. So I think that's a big one, is that it's easy to cut and see the spend stop immediately, but the effects of marketing are often long-term. And so, you may not notice until 4, 5, 6 months down the road that your marketing efforts were really successful in driving sales or driving new business. But in the immediate short term, that it saved you money. And so I feel like that is why a lot of people pull the plug from marketing pretty quickly, especially from the advertising side.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And I think it goes to what you said, is that how are you tracking your return on ad spend, your ROI? What does that look like on a regular basis? One thing that we talk about on the investor side of the house is the LTV to CAC ratio. So, understanding what the lifetime value is of your customer is incredibly important, but obviously just as important, the only way to get a ratio is to understand how much it's costing you to acquire that customer.
Yep.
And a marketing line item on even us as a marketing agency, when I see that line item and I'm like, whoa, what did we spend that on exactly? Yeah. There's this aspect of let's dig into this number, because I don't remember spending that much this past month or whatever it is, and taking a look at that. So it does become, from a financial perspective, just a chunk of money with a questionable value. So definitely I could see why people would go there. But just as you said, even when you're doing ad campaigns with a vendor as sophisticated as Google, there's a learning speed, right? Depending on ad spend, what the cost per clicks are, things like this. It takes some period of time for even a Google, as sophisticated as they are, to figure out, where we need to place this ad, how long it needs to run. If you take that and just extrapolate out to the brand as a whole across your audience as a whole, and how long it takes for those things for all those things to get right sized, and then thinking about how negatively turning campaigns on and off, you're just now our ROAS is garbage because we keep spending the maximum amount because we're constantly relearning and resetting this thing up. The same is true on the macro level. It's a hell of a lot harder to calculate, and and it definitely. So at the end of the day, not a great idea. But I think if you pull the string a little more, it's probably the real root of the problem is the lack of metrics and dashboarding or things around how you're tracking the spend, and then all the way through to lifetime value of that customer that you acquired through whatever your marketing channels were.
Yeah. And I think when you were bringing up lifetime value and CAC, and you're there's so many costs involved in that, a lot of businesses don't look at the full picture, right? You're just looking at your marketing and advertising costs. And those are siloed. And so that approach kind of crosses over through the rest of the business. Marketing doesn't live in its own world. proper go-to-market strategy includes the sales team. It includes your product team for, exactly what you're selling. If you spend all of your money on research and development, then you have no money for marketing. And so you have this great product that nobody knows about. And then if you spend the money in sales, like you have people selling this great product that still nobody knows about. But if, so it's all about getting that right mix. And I think that one of the reasons marketing gets devalued is because people are like, we have a great product and we have a great sales team. So the sales team will be responsible for handling marketing. And their approach is going to be probably a little bit different than a marketer's approach. Well, for some businesses that may work really well, but I think marketing agencies, or marketing, not necessarily even marketing agencies, because a lot of times when we're discussing, why people are cutting back and its cost and this and that, it's a matter of proving your value as an agency. Some people, they don't have the budget for an agency, but you have to have the budget for marketing. And marketing is so many things that people don't necessarily consider. It's not just how many ads did I spend? It's, where am I putting my product in front of people? Where does it sit in the store? Like that is still considered marketing. It's just, what does this display look like when if we're doing fashion, like how am I going to put the clothes together on this mannequin to get these different certain pieces moved? What are my discounts going to be? Where is it going to live in the store? All of these things go into marketing. And so when you talk about cutting your marketing budget, it's usually focused on advertising. But if you're doing a lot of these other different portions of marketing and you're working with all these different teams, marketing should be involved in your pricing as well. They're going to know who your audience is. They're going to be doing competitive research and analysis and determining, hey, your competitor charges $3,000 for this product. You've been charging $3,500. Do you have a $500 value makeup? Is that in the brand itself? Is that in the product? Like, what's that difference? Or do we need to come back down to $3,000? Are we going to make this a price war? And you get a lot of that from marketing where you may not have the data and the backing in other departments.
Yeah, well, it's funny that you say that too, because I have seen at times, like, depending on accounting practices and things, like where they put something like a discount, is that above the line, or do they put it into below the line into marketing in order to make the revenue numbers look better?
Right.
So I think that, and that does become, again, it gets back to some of that sophistication around, like, how are you tracking your numbers and how are you playing this thing out? Because, what are you, if you're testing appropriately and you're building out your marketing channels appropriately, then, and you're constantly doing that look back, like, you should know, like, hey, this is effective. And a similar way, like, if we ran a campaign and, and I keep bringing it back to kind of this more, what I think, digestible thought process, right? Like, if we're running a campaign across multiple channels, whether it's like YouTube and just Google ads and say Instagram and Facebook and TikTok, and you're seeing, maybe a cheaper cost per click, but a lower conversion rate or whatever, right? Like, you kind of look at what your data is telling you on where your audience truly is. And in that case, we would move budget to the things that are driving the expected or desired result. We don't just indefinitely just keep throwing money at the wall hoping that it sticks, right? Like, there's a reason behind that. And I think, as you kind of said earlier, maybe you can't afford agency, although even then, like, there's part of me that feels, of course, being an agency, right? Like, obviously I'm going to, it's self-serving to, like, be like, oh, you need an agency. But, there is something to be said for having a group of people that all they do is marketing for a lot of different people. Like, that's one thing. It's a challenge being an internal marketer or a marketer that's in a specific business to constantly be testing across multiple channels with multiple things. Like, you don't have multiple, you have one customer and that's your customer. And generally you're pulled in a lot of different directions if you're internal marketing, because it's not just about marketing to the customer. Sometimes about marketing to your team, just to keep your team engaged and excited, right? So there's a lot of different channels and pieces and parts that go into that. So I think, and how, a lot of times the people we work with, there's a handful of, maybe one or two marketing people actually. And it's just like, we have a whole team of people where, it's like between dashboarding and checking and research and reviewing and testing and comparing. And, I don't know how you would do it. But otherwise, to be honest with you, like, it's tough.
It becomes a lot. And I, again, look at analogies for everything. And I think one that I've used a lot has always been like dieting, exercise, lifestyle. And I look at that and kind of use it for a lot of things, but I use it a lot in marketing when we're talking about, like, yes, it is the first thing that people will likely cut when they're cutting back finances and stuff like that is they're probably going to look at a few different things, but one thing that often comes down to it is like grocery shopping. Food that's bad for you is cheap, generally speaking. Fast food is cheaper than going out to a nicer restaurant that's organic, that's all this. It's the same way at the grocery store. Like, junk food is cheaper than healthy food. And so when we're looking at marketing, like, you can cut back by buying, to-go options or like stuff that's from the freezer or whatever.
Sure.
But in the long term, it's probably better for you from a health standpoint to buy fresh vegetables, go to the farmer's market as opposed to the grocery store, all these different things, right?
Yeah.
It's the same way when we're talking about hiring an agency. Yes, I can go online and Google, different workout plans, different diet plans, all the things, right? I can find out what nutrition I need, et cetera, and track it all on my own. That's a lot of work for one person. Now, granted, if that's your sole focus, maybe it's a little bit easier. But for a lot of people, if you have the budget and the resources, hiring a personal trainer, talking to somebody whose their sole job is to do this for a lot of people so that they do have other testing opportunities. They know what's been working. They're studying up and getting, more information. They're constantly reading on like what works and what doesn't work. They have your body doing different things. So they are testing far more often, far more relevant. They continue to stay informed. You can kind of use that same approach for like marketing, right? Like, yes, you can do it internally, but as you were saying, you get pulled in different directions. There's always a fight for your attention. And, sometimes it's easy to just go with what works instead of learning, constantly what's coming out. And even if you do, you have your one or two sources, going to somebody who has 25 different sources that they hit every time is just going to offer you more, more choice. You can say yes or no to different things, but it's just going to give you that wealth of information.
Yeah, that made me think too, like the whole reason this agency exists at all, right? Part of it was the whole idea was that, even being an agency that verticalizes and focuses in a specific thing, you still get your level of expertise and your width of just knowledge is broader just because you have many customers, you're testing a lot of things in a lot of markets, doing a lot of different things, so you can use that knowledge to then be better informed for your next customer. But that was the whole thing that I was surprised by going to a Google Marketing Live and finding out there's a whole group of new ad types that came out that when we were in multifamily doing this stuff, it wasn't for us because we're not a car dealership or we weren't these other things. And I was just like, man, I didn't even know that this was a thing. And here I am, a professional in marketing. Like, how do I not know what the hell's going on in marketing? And it wasn't like they were announcing it at Google Marketing Live, like, and I, of course that'd be natural then, but it was like, these are just things that everybody's been using and there's like feedback on and things that people are trying to get more insight into. And I was just completely unaware. And, and hence the reason to be like, I should go back to the basics of doing this small thing on my own just to stay aware so I don't become irrelevant by being too narrowly focused in a specific industry. And, and hence we have De Novo Digital now as a growing agency. But I think it very much just, even with all the technology we have with AI and all these things and these questions, I think, even with that, there's still the gap there. Like, your ability to know something shouldn't have a blinder in certain spots because you can ask these questions in as easy ways as you want to ask them and just be like, tell me what I'm missing and get some good insight. But at the end of the day, you still need that ability to try it out, test it, make sure that you have the right way of tracking and calculating the results of those tests in order to apply them. And I think there's still the breadth of experience that you're going to have in those trials. And, maybe you nail it on the first try and congratulations. But if not, it does take somebody like us to potentially step in there and use all these different experiences in order to try to get that home run on the first try, as opposed to too long and too much trial and error without any real way to tabulate it.
I think that conversion feedback is really important for agencies or for any third party. That's the piece that I think really sets good agencies apart from like an agency per se, like just,
Right.
an agency, is being able to not only understand what your marketing goals are, like, hey, yes, we want to drive more leads, or we want to drive more people to specific pages or get more awareness or whatever, but it's also that understanding of what the overall business goals are and how the marketing that we're doing impacts that, and how we can relate that to tangible metrics. Like,
Yeah.
it's not enough to just be like, we did a great job getting your name out there. You have tons of leads. They, hit all of your criteria for qualified. That's great. Now we need to know, like, how many of them closed and converted to whatever action you're looking for? How many of them became evangelists for your product? How many of them are we going to continue to reach out to when you have future products and services? How do we get more of them to become more evangelists and create user-generated content for you that we can then repurpose and kind of keep that full cycle marketing going? I think that's the piece that great marketing agencies do, and that adds a lot of value and usually reduces the amount that marketing gets shut off, because they're able to see, oh, this agency does have a ton of value. They bring so much to us, instead of just saying, like, we brought you an 800% lift in website traffic. That's great if their goal is to just have a bunch of website traffic and they're going to sell ad space on it. And yeah, like, it aligns. But that's not most businesses' model. It's about getting outside of just the marketing metrics for sure.
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly it. I mean, at the end of the day, like, are you holding whoever it is accountable to the metrics, and are they the metrics that actually matter? Like, what is, and I know we've talked about that before, and some of this is old as far as, for me, like, the last time I heard about it, but I used that, I mean, we have customers that would be like, well, I was getting this cost per click, and that's what I'm expecting you to get. And then it's like, well, if that's all you care about, then why are you talking to us? Right? Because obviously the reason you're talking to us is because targeting inexpensive keywords that are driving your cost per click down aren't actually providing any value at all, because you're not converting any of those people because their intent isn't in a buying phase, right? So there's just these kind of things where you just start to realize, like, and what's even more surprising to me is how often people that are, where this isn't the case. Like, I don't know how you get away with that in the grand scheme of things, right? Like, how you get away with not showing the return or the value or whatever it is, like, your metrics to kind of show what's going on. Like, I don't know. Like, because as a business owner, as an investor, like, these are things that works,
Shocking that in 2025, we still have conversations with people and we'll ask very basic questions like cost per click or CPM or anything kind of on that very, very upper level of marketing. And clients or prospective clients will say, like, I don't know. We're not getting reporting. We're not looking at it. And
right.
It comes back to, like, okay, so why do you want an agency? Like, if you don't put any emphasis on your own of looking at what they're doing to keep them accountable, like, why are you switching? Why do you have one? Kind of what's the overall purpose there? And I think it's interesting. We were talking in the beginning of, like, talking to customers about, okay, well, like, why does that CPC matter? Like, that education piece is really big in marketing. And I think agencies and marketers in general can kind of stray away from that often because they want to get into, like, okay, like, this is the plan. This is who we're going to target. This campaign is going to be awesome. But you're not starting with, like, a foundation of, this is why marketing is important. This is why these things matter versus these other things. You just kind of jump straight into it without setting expectations in education.
Well, and you're right, because at the end of the day, not to cast aspersions, if you will, to competitors, but most people, unless you're in marketing, are not marketing pros, right? Like, I mean, what is it like? if you know 10% more than the next guy about a topic, you're the expert.
Right.
And I get it, right? Because sometimes I think even as a marketer, it's hard to show, like it's SEO is the one that comes to my thought process is showing value unless there's a direct conversion from that initial thing, right? And that gets into conversion attributions or these types of things. And I get how complicated it could be to show value in certain things. And sometimes it's one of those where you kind of show up and it's like, oh, you don't know anything about marketing. And well, I don't want to be the first to tell you how to hold me accountable. I want to do a great job for you. And it's not that I'm not going to try my best, but if I have to get here and start teaching you how to grade me, and legitimately, I can tell you how to grade me by like, look how cheap my cost per click is, right? Like, look at this guy's awesome. It's only 10 cents a click. So those I think are some of the challenges. But, most of our clients, I mean, they're the first to admit to us that it's like, yeah, I don't really know marketing. I mean, that's why we're hiring you in the first place. I don't know what I don't know. And so it is kind of important for us to do some of the education, like at the end of the day, like part of the reason they hire us too is because it's like, I don't want to become a marketing expert, right? Like we're hiring you to do this thing because I don't want to do it, right? So like at the end of the day, like you don't have to sit here and like explain to me like all this stuff. And I think that's how you do have clients coming in and it's like, we haven't been tracking any of that. Like we don't have any of that in our wheelhouse of things. And it's not, and a lot of times it's like, it's not that we didn't think that would be a nice to have. It wasn't offered and we kind of were like, well, maybe this is just how it is, right? So there's some aspect of, marketing is one of those things. And it's truly a partnership with the company. Like our success and their success are very tied together. And I think that at times, like, there is some aspects as the client even to be less like aggressive because it's like we got to work together to make this successful. So you don't necessarily want to jump into that relationship by just hammering people, but like at the same time, like how do we know? And some of the same things like you mentioned sales, like that's one of the things that I think about too, because some of the challenges as an agency is like how good is your sales team? I mean, I remember us being like, yeah, we sent this many leads, but we also know that like you only picked up the phone like 4 out of 10 times. So like, I don't know, like, were they bad leads or did you just not pick up your phone? These kind of things, like when you ask people, like, what is your sales cycle timelines and things like that? So like, what is your required pipe need to be in order to get the quotas that you guys are driving towards? And, sometimes that's its own thing. Like as soon as we're like, well, we don't do it that way, or, I don't know, these kind of things. Like, again, you kind of get into this, like, okay, well, like our job as a marketing agency is to provide marketing qualified leads to your sales team to convert into closing. Like we don't close the people. We just get them to the, we bring them to the water. It's your job to get them to drink it, right? So that's our goal. So at the end of the day, if you don't understand that next process, it doesn't matter how good we are. You could have the most motivated potential lead ever. We walked them around the desert for the last week to get them ready to get to this water. And if you can't close that at that point, that's its own challenge. And these are just all things to be aware of. But I think at the end of the day, to think that that's the first thing you're going to turn off to get through something. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people did it. I remember during COVID, a lot of our event spaces and stuff, right? And, a lot of them, and I get it because they weren't having events. So, I mean, at that point, sometimes it's like you got zero revenue coming in. So you got to really cut all your expenses. And, those are different cases. But I think at the end of the day, like, and it's probably not wrong either, to your other point, is if you cannot tell what the marketing dollars are leading to, and you don't have those KPIs built in and you don't have that reporting, you probably do need to cut that marketing because you're not doing it right anyway. Like there's some, like it may not mean that you shouldn't be spending marketing dollars, but you shouldn't be spending those marketing dollars because you don't have any way of holding the people that you're paying for accountable to the results that you're expecting. So anyway, I'll leave it there.
I think that's a good closing point is that, if you can't properly track and hold your marketing team accountable, even if they are successful, you're probably wasting some dollars anyway. And so, it's really about understanding that process first before going all out into marketing. So Yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
All right.
Yeah. All right. I guess we'll close it there. You know, one thing that we don't say, like that I'm Nick and you're Josh. I don't know if we ever even say our names. And hopefully we'll get. I know we started getting some subscribers, so hopefully we'll have
Yeah,
to mention
we
that.
should add a
at some
point to do that. I feel like that should be done in the studio just because it looks nicer and they can just snip it in.
Yeah. Like,
So
yeah.
I'm
Subscribe
leaving the recording
here,
going
here.
just so everybody can hear our
Yeah, like
thoughts.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's what I mean. Like just to think about how to make sure that we're doing that in the future. Is
Hit
just,
that subscribe button and turn on your
Exactly.
notifications for every new drop
Yeah.
on Thursday.
I know. Well, like, and we dropped already. Like, I don't know how many it was, like 6 or something, all at the front. And I think the first one got most
4.
traction.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
first one,
I thought.
I'm just checking it now.
Yeah, I think the AI one is going to be a good one, but I just feel like the first one's got the biggest boost because I think it was the first one, so we led with it.
80 views on YouTube and I think 9 or 10 on Spotify.
Oh, gotcha.
And the fourth one, oddly enough, is the one that has the next most views on YouTube, and that has 12. So all total
What's the
across 4 videos, we have just over 100 views.
What's the fourth one?
Test everything, trust nothing.